where every paw is family and every heartbeat matters. Welcome to Noble Nest Veterinary, your pet's noble home for healing. It was early autumn, just when the leaves began to turn, curling like forgotten letters, their vibrant colors fading into the muted hues of an impending winter. The air had a crisp edge to it, but not so much as to feel bitter, more like a soft reminder that change was in the air, that everything could be different, if only for a moment. I stood there, my hands tucked into my jacket pockets, the weight of the world heavy on my shoulders. I wasn't supposed to be out there in the cold. I was supposed to be inside, doing what I did best, teaching the kids, pretending everything was fine when nothing felt fine at all. The world outside was too loud for me, too bright. It was easier to stand still, to let the wind fill the gaps in my heart where something had gone missing a long time ago. And then I saw him. A small, trembling creature huddled by the school gate. His fur was matted and dirty, his ribs visible beneath the fur as though he hadn't eaten in days. His eyes, though, stood out the most, wide, watery, full of fear, and yet, in a strange way, full of hope, too. I wasn't supposed to care. I had no energy left for another lost soul. But something in those eyes grabbed me, dug deep into the places I had buried long ago. I walked over to him, my shoes crunching the autumn leaves as I approached. The dog didn't move, didn't bark. He just looked up at me with those eyes, those pleading, unspoken words. A scarf lay next to him, frayed at the edges, a hint of pale blue threading through the fabric. I bent down, carefully picking it up. It had the faintest scent of a child, the smell of something once loved. My heart clenched, and for a moment I was back in another life, a life before everything fell apart. He was so small, so fragile. I scooped him up without thinking, cradling him in my arms like a broken thing that needed fixing. And as I walked back to the school doors, I couldn't shake the feeling that, in some way, he was saving me. It wasn't long before the whispers started. "Did you see Mr. Carter? Crying over a dog? It's pathetic. Who even brings a stray into a school? It's just a dog." The ridicule came like a steady, unyielding tide. They didn't understand, and honestly, I didn't expect them to. But it wasn't the kids I was worried about. It was the way their laughter ate in my mind, how I let it slip into the cracks of my own insecurities. The truth was, I had been grieving for a long time, and I had learned not to talk about it. Not even with myself. When my son, Oliver, died, when the accident happened, it felt like the world had slipped into a fog I couldn't crawl out of. Days became weeks, weeks bled into months. And I had to keep going, keep teaching, keep pretending I was okay. But I wasn't. And the dog, the one with the matted fur and the sad eyes, he reminded me of everything I had lost, everything I never wanted to feel again. The school principal, Mrs. Thompson, called me into her office after the bell rang. I had expected it. She'd heard the whispers, too. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice thick with concern. "We need to talk about the dog. The children are mocking me." I interrupted softly, my voice catching in my throat. She hesitated, eyeing me as if she wanted to say something more, but instead sighed, pushing her glasses up her nose. "It's just not appropriate, bringing an animal into the school. It's causing a distraction." I nodded. I understood. But I didn't agree. "I think you need to see something." Mrs. Thompson clicked a button on her desk, and the security footage popped up on her screen. She swiveled it so I could see. There I was, standing outside by the gate, holding the dog. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the dog lifted his paw and placed it on my hand. The camera didn't catch everything, but it caught enough. The way I hesitated, my hand trembling just slightly before I stroked his fur, the way my face softened, and the quiet tears that began to fall. The dog had no idea, but he had brought me back to life in that moment. Mrs. Thompson didn't say anything at first. She just watched the screen, her fingers tapping nervously on the desk. "I know you're going through a lot, Mr. Carter," she finally said. "Maybe this dog, maybe he's helping you more than you realize." From that day forward, everything began to change. It started slowly, as most things do. The dog, whom I had named Max, became a fixture in our classroom. At first, the students were skeptical, but then something magical happened. There was Lily, the quiet girl who sat in the back of the class, her eyes always looking down. She hadn't spoken much since her parents' divorce. But when she saw Max, she smiled. Not a big smile, but a small, timid one. She reached out just to pet him, her hand trembling as she did. And then, the next day, she spoke, just a word at first, and then a sentence. And before long, she was talking to Max as if he was a friend she had known her whole life. Then came Jason. He was a troublemaker. Always picking fights, always angry, as if the world owed him something. He glared at Max the first time he saw him, as if he were a nuisance. But I caught him one afternoon, sitting alone in the corner with the dog, gently scratching his ears, his eyes far away as if he had forgotten where he was. And one by one the students changed. They came to see Max as more than just a dog. He became a bridge, a way for them to reach out to each other, to open up in ways they never had before. But there was something else. Something that started eating at me. Max had a past. He wasn't just some stray who wandered into our lives. He had been loved lives, and somehow that made everything harder. I began asking around, visiting shelters, and even contacting animal rescue organizations. It didn't take long to find out who left him by the school gate. I reached out to the local shelter first. They told me they had seen Max's face before, that his condition matched a report filed a few months ago. Someone had found him malnourished and abandoned, wandering near a highway. The man who had taken him in, they said, had been distraught, but left him when his new job became too much to handle. The shelter had been unable to find Max's previous owner, but the story was starting to unfold like a puzzle, one piece at a time. I couldn't stop thinking about that scarf, the pale blue one that Max had been curled up next to when I first found him. It haunted me, a silent reminder that he had once belonged to someone who had cared for him. But why had they left him? The thought of abandonment twisted in my stomach. I had been abandoned too. I understood the feeling, the heart-wrenching emptiness that came with being left behind. But what had happened to Max's person? Why couldn't they keep him? Why couldn't they have tried harder? I was getting lost in the details. It was too much to process all at once, so I pulled myself away from it for a moment and focused on Max. He was there, his soft fur against my leg, his eyes looking up at me as if he understood. Every day, he came to school, greeted the children with an eager wag of his tail, and sat by my side during lessons. He didn't ask for much. He only asked to be seen, to be loved, and in return, he gave so much more than I ever thought I could have. A week later, I received a call. It was from the local animal shelter, and they had located Max's previous owner. The conversation was brief but clear. A woman, disabled, with a trembling voice, confessed that she had been struggling with addiction and couldn't keep Max anymore. She hadn't been able to give him the life he deserved, and when she had hit rock bottom, she had left him behind. She said it was the hardest decision she'd ever made. I listened to her voice crack as she explained, but it didn't stop the anger from rising in me. How could she just let him go like that? How could anyone abandon a dog that had once been their whole world? I hung up, my hands shaking with a mix of disbelief and sympathy. The following Monday, I walked into the school with Max by my side, but something was different. Max's ears were pricked, his tail wagging nervously. He stopped at the door, sniffing the air, and then I saw it. A woman standing at the gates, looking lost and uncertain. It was her, the woman who had left him behind. I didn't move. I stood still, unsure of what to do. She hadn't seen us yet. Max, on the other hand, had already caught the scent. His body tensed, and before I could stop him, he darted across the yard, barking excitedly as he ran towards her. The woman froze, her hands trembling as Max leapt into her arms. For a moment, the world stood still. There was no sound, no movement, just the quiet reunion of a dog and his past. Tears welled up in my eyes as I watched them. She had been crying too, her face wet with emotion. I could see the guilt and regret in her eyes, but I could also see something else. Hope. She was trying to piece her life back together, one broken step at a time. Max had never given up on her. He had waited, faithfully, for the day she would return. Max's tail wagged furiously, as if he had never been abandoned, as if the years of neglect had never happened. The woman hugged him tightly, her sobs muffled by his fur. It was a quiet moment, but one that spoke volumes. No one said anything, and no one needed to. The air felt different somehow, less heavy, as if Max had managed to heal a little of the brokenness in all of us. When the woman left, she gave me a brief, apologetic smile. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I don't deserve him, but he deserves a chance." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I was still processing the weight of it all. But as I walked back into the school with Max at my side, I knew something had changed. We were both different now, in ways I couldn't explain. He had healed me just as much as I had healed him. Over the next few weeks, things began to settle. Max still came to school every day, his presence a calming balm to the chaos of the classroom. The students continued to open up, and more breakthroughs happened. A child who had been mute for years finally whispered her first words. A troubled boy found his first friend in a long time. And even the staff began to soften, seeing the power of a dog's silent compassion. I realized then that Max had brought me back to life in ways no one else could. He didn't need saving, he had saved me. But the story didn't end there. Months later, a new dog appeared at the gates of our school. He wasn't Max, but he carried the same look in his eyes, a mix of fear, sadness, and a desperate hope for connection. And as I stood there, with Max by my side, I knew what I had to do, because that's what Max had taught me. That no one should ever be left behind, and sometimes the smallest creatures that can change everything. I approached the new dog slowly, just as I had done with Max months ago. He didn't run away, but he didn't approach me either. His body was thin, his fur scruffy and dirty, and his eyes, those eyes, told the same story Max's had. He was abandoned. Oh, I kneeled down, extending my hand toward him. The students were watching from the classroom windows, some of them whispering, others just observing. The same cycle repeating, like a story that had come full circle. The dog sniffed the air, then cautiously stepped closer. He was hesitant, unsure, but there was a faint flicker of trust in his gaze. I didn't rush him. I waited for him to decide, just like I had waited for Max all those months ago. He inched closer, his trembling body inching toward the safety of my hand. It was an act of pure instinct. He wasn't looking for food. He wasn't looking for shelter. He was looking for love, for the quiet understanding of a soul that knew what it felt like to be abandoned, and yet still had enough room in its heart to care. And in that moment, I realized something important. It wasn't just the animals that needed rescuing. It was us too. The next few days blurred together, filled with meetings and discussions about what to do with the new dog. Max stayed by my side as we tried to find a solution. The principal had approved, of course, after seeing how Max had changed the school, how he had brought us together, even on the days we didn't feel like being together. The school became a safe place, a place where people were starting to heal, and it wasn't just Max doing the healing anymore. The students, having seen the transformation in both themselves and in me, began to take action. They raised money to help care for the new dog, which they named Buddy. They created posters, designed a fundraiser event, and spread awareness about adoption. They weren't just learning lessons from the textbooks anymore. They were learning the most important lesson of all, that kindness, even the smallest act, can change the course of a life. Max and Buddy became inseparable. They were more than just dogs. They were symbols of the power of second chances, of healing through connection. Max was still the heart of our classroom, the one who had led us all out of darkness, but Buddy was starting to carve his own space, gently proving that no one ever has to face the world alone. Weeks turned into months. The air grew colder, and then the flowers began to bloom again. It was spring, and everything seemed brighter, even in the dullest moments. I no longer felt like I was standing in the shadows of a life that had been stolen from me. Max had helped me step into the light, and I could finally see clearly again. One afternoon, I sat by the windows, watching the children play with the dogs on the school lawn. Max was leading Buddy in a game of fetch, wagging his tail with all the joy he could muster. It was hard to believe that he had ever been abandoned, hard to imagine a time when he had been the one left behind. I was lost in the sight of them when a soft voice interrupted my thoughts. Lily, the quiet Duro who had found her voice thanks to Max, stood beside me, holding a piece of paper in her hands. "Mr. Carter?" she said, her voice still soft but steady now. "I made this for you." She handed me the paper, and I unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing, a picture of Max, Buddy, and me standing together in the schoolyard. The sun was shining brightly, and we were all smiling. "You helped us all find our way," she said quietly. My heart swelled in my chest as I looked at the drawing. It wasn't just a picture. It was a reflection of the change we had all gone through. We had been saved, together, piece by piece. I smiled back at her, feeling the warmth of the moment settle into my bones. "Thank you, Lily. This means more than you can imagine." She smiled shyly, then ran off to join the other kids. I watched her go, knowing that this moment was something none of us would ever forget. That evening, as I stood in the school parking lot, Max by my side, I reflected on everything that had happened. It felt like a lifetime ago that I had stood in this very spot, heartbroken and lost, unsure if I would ever find my way again. But Max had shown me that healing didn't happen overnight. It was a process, one step at a time, and sometimes it took a little help from those who had suffered too. I wasn't alone anymore. I never had been. I had just needed to let myself believe that. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in a soft golden hue, and I bent down and rubbed Max's head. He looked up at me, his eyes full of a quiet understanding that had first drawn me to him. "You saved me," I whispered, "and you saved all of us." Max wagged his tail in response, as if he understood. As I sat back in my chair that night, the warmth of the day still lingering in my heart, I thought about the countless dogs, cats, and animals that needed homes, love, and care. And I made a silent promise to myself and to Max that I would never stop being a part of their journey, that I would always fight for them. Because the truth was clear now. Max had not just saved me. He had taught me how to love again. The following weeks felt like a dream. The school had transformed, not just in terms of the animals that had become a part of our lives, but in the way the students began to connect, support, and care for one another. Max had been the catalyst for that change, and Buddy was following right behind. But it wasn't just the dogs doing the work anymore. They had given us all something precious, a sense of purpose, of belonging, a reminder that love didn't have to be earned. It was given freely. The student would take turns walking Max and Buddy around the school grounds during lunch breaks. Some of them started staying after class to help feed them or just to sit by their side, lost in quiet moments of peace. It was beautiful to witness, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. They were no longer just my students. They had become the kind of people who saw beyond the surface, who knew that every soul deserved a second chance. But there were moments when I would find myself alone with Max, sitting in the silence of the classroom after the students had left, and I'd think about how far we'd come. I'd run my hand over his soft fur, feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest as he slept beside me. He had come from a life of uncertainty, a life where people had failed him. But here he was, strong, steadfast, and unconditionally loyal. And I couldn't help but wonder, what if he hadn't shown up that day? What if he had kept walking, never stopped, never sat by the gate to wait for me? That night, as I sat in my car, waiting for the traffic to clear up outside the school, I received another call. A strange number, one I hadn't recognized before. Hesitant, I answered. "Hello, Mr. Carter?" I froze. It was the voice of a woman, shaky and uncertain. "This is Mrs. Owens," she said. "I'm calling about the dog Max. I think you might know him." The words hit me like a bolt of lightning. My heart raced in my chest. Was this the woman who had abandoned Max? I had never expected to hear from her, never wanted to. Yet, here she was on the other end of the line. I don't know how to explain this," she continued, her voice filled with guilt. "I've been sober for 6 months now. I've been trying to turn my life around, and I can't stop thinking about Max. I know I don't deserve his love, but I'm asking, is he happy? Is he okay?" The words tumbled out like a broken dam. There was no anger in her voice, no blame, only an overwhelming sense of regret. I sat in silence for a long moment, unsure of what to say. Max had already made his choice. His loyalty was no longer bound by the past. He had found a place in my life and in so many others that had healed us all. But at the same time, I couldn't deny that this moment, this call, was a chance for her, for both of us, to close a chapter that had been left open for far too long. "He's doing more than okay," I said, my voice steady but soft. "He's part of a family now. He's changed us, all of us, in ways I can't even explain. I think I think you're right to ask. He deserves to be happy, and he is. But I'll be honest with you, it's not just about him anymore. It's about all of us. We're all healing, and sometimes it's the animals who help us heal the most. I paused, then added, Max doesn't need saving anymore, Mrs. Owens. He found his way, and so did I. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, softly, she said, I understand. Thank you. And I'm sorry. I'll never forget him. I don't think he'll forget you either, I said quietly. We said our goodbyes, and I ended the call, the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. I knew this was an important moment, one that gave us both closure. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about understanding that life, for all its messiness, had a way of finding balance, of giving people and animals second chances. The next day, when Max sat by my side, his head resting on my lap as the students gathered around, I looked out over the classroom and thought about all the lives he had touched. He wasn't just a dog. He had become a symbol of resilience, of finding beauty even in the broken pieces. And as the sun filtered through the classroom windows, casting a soft golden glow over the room, I realized that Max wasn't just a savior to me. He had shown us all what it meant to love without expectation, to give without needing anything in return. He had been the quiet force that had changed everything, for the students, for Mrs. Owens, for me. As the bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Max stood up and trotted to the door. The children followed him, laughing and calling out to him, eager to spend another moment in his presence. I watched them go, a sense of peace washing over me, knowing that Max had brought something into our lives that would last long after the school year was over. I stood up, following the children, and as I reached the door, I turned to look at the empty classroom one last time. The silence of the room was comforting now, no longer a weight. It felt like the beginning of something new. And as I walked outside into the cool afternoon air, Max at my side, I realized that sometimes the greatest journeys were the ones we didn't expect. The ones that came quietly, on four paws, carrying with them the possibility of change, of second chances, and of love. With the soft rustle of leaves underfoot and the dogs by my side, I knew that the road ahead was still long. But that was okay. We were no longer walking it alone. The days that followed felt like a quiet exhale, a release from the tension that had built up over months of uncertainty and grief. Max and Buddy continued their work, not just as companions, but as healers, binding us all together with their quiet presence. The school had transformed, but it wasn't just the students who had changed. I had changed too. Each morning as I walked into the classroom, Max at my heels, I found myself smiling more often. It wasn't forced. It wasn't a mask I wore for the world to see. It was real. I was beginning to live again, not in the shadow of what I had lost, but in the light of what I had found, something unexpected, something that filled the gaps I never thought could be healed. One afternoon, as the school year drew to a close, I found myself alone in the classroom again. It was just me and Max. The final bell had rung, and the hallways were empty, the quiet settling over the building like a soft blanket. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a sigh as I stared out the window. The sky was streaked with shades of pink and orange, a beautiful mess of color. The kind of sunset that made everything feel possible again. Max, sensing the quiet in me, padded over and lay down by my feet, his head resting on the floor, eyes half closed in contentment. It wasn't the kind of silence that felt heavy anymore. It was comfortable, peaceful. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't haunted by the past. Maybe it's time to let go of the old, I said softly, looking down at him. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. There was a knock on the door then, and I turned to see Lily standing in the doorway, holding a small box in her hands. She smiled shyly, stepping into the room. I wanted to give this to you, she said, holding the box out to me. It's a thank you. For everything. I took the box, confused, but touched by the gesture. Inside I found a small journal, the pages soft and worn. A few words were written on the first page, in Lily's neat handwriting, for Mr. Carter, for showing me how to believe in myself again, and for Max, who showed me that kindness can change the world. I looked up at her, my throat tight. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to thank her, to tell her that she had given me as much as I had given her, but the words didn't come. I just smiled, wiping away a stray tear that threatened to escape. "You don't have to thank me," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're part of this." Lily nodded, her eyes bright with something unspoken. "Max helped me. He helped all of us. I'll never forget him, and I won't forget what you've done for us either." I watched her leave, the journal still in my hands. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something like hope, real hope. Not the kind that came from wishing things were different, but the kind that came from knowing things could get better. Not just for me, but for everyone who had been touched by Max's quiet, unyielding love. The end of the school year came and went, but the lessons we had learned didn't fade. Max's presence lingered in the hallways, in the way the students greeted each other, in the quiet moments when they'd pause to pet Buddy as he wagged his tail by the gates. He had done more than change us. He had shown us how to open our hearts, how to give without expecting, how to love without boundaries. And even as the summer stretched ahead of us, I knew this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. There were still so many animals out there, waiting for their second chance, waiting to find their own Max, the one who would lead them to the light. The phone call came in late July, while I was sitting outside in the garden, the warm breeze making the leaves dance above me. It was from the local shelter again. "We've got another one," the voice on the other end said. "Has a little rough around the edges, but we think he could use someone like you." I didn't need to ask for details. I knew what they meant. I knew what I had to do. "Send him to me," I said, my voice steady. "I'll take him in." And just like that, the cycle began again. Another dog, another chance. Because, after all, this was the kind of world I wanted to live in now. One where no one, no animal, no soul was ever left behind. The next day, I met the dog in front of the shelter. He was big, with dark eyes full of uncertainty, but there was something in his gaze that told me he wasn't beyond saving. His fur was matted, and he looked like he hadn't been cared for in a while. But there was hope in him, and that was all I needed to see. As I led him into the car, Max by my side, I realized something. I wasn't rescuing him. I wasn't saving him. He was saving me again, just like Max had done. He was teaching me that there was no end to the love we could give, no limit to the ways we could heal each other. The road ahead might be long, but I wasn't walking it alone. Not anymore. And so, with the sound of paws tapping against the pavement, I drove home with 2 dogs by my side. The journey was far from over, but I was ready for whatever came next. Because love, in its purest form, had a way of transforming everything. As the days passed, the dog, whom we named Charlie, became a part of our lives. He wasn't like Max, not yet. He was hesitant, unsure of his place in the world, much like I had been before Max found me. But with time, he softened, trusting little by little, until he began to show the same quiet devotion that had healed me so deeply. And though Charlie wasn't the same dog that Max had been, he carried the same message, that there was always room for another chance. A second chance, a third, even. The idea that healing wasn't linear, and that we all had the capacity to change, if only given the time, the space, and the love. Max had shown me that animals, in their simplest form, could teach us the most profound lessons. They didn't need words to express their feelings. It was in the way they nuzzled against you, the way they looked into your eyes as if they understood, the way they forgave without question. Max, Buddy, and now Charlie, they had all played their parts in a story much larger than just my own. One crisp autumn evening, I stood in the schoolyard, looking out over the grounds where so many lives had been touched by these animals. The students had graduated to the next phase of their lives, but the lessons they learned here would stay with them. They had learned how to be kind to others, how to listen, how to open up. They had learned that no one was truly alone, and that sometimes all it took was a small, quiet creature to remind us of our shared humanity. I wasn't just a teacher anymore. I was a witness to something far bigger, a community built on love, healing, and second chances. I looked down at Max, who had grown older over the years, his fur beginning to show signs of time. He sat next to me, as loyal as ever, his gaze calm but wise. And Charlie, the once uncertain dog, now sat proudly at my side, his tail wagging as if he had always belonged. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. I breathed in deeply, feeling a peace settle over me that I hadn't known in years. Life had come full circle, and it was no longer just about what I had lost. It was about what I had found, not in the world, but in myself, in the animals that had walked with me through it all. It was late that evening when I received a letter. It was from Mrs. Owens, the woman who had once abandoned Max. She had been sober for a few years now, and with her new life, she had started working at an animal shelter. The letter was short, but it was enough. I wanted to let you know that I'm working to help other dogs like Max, the ones who have been abandoned, the ones who are waiting for a second chance. I'll never be able to repay the love he gave me, but I can try. I can try to give something back. Tears welled in my eyes as I read those words. She had found her redemption. She had found her purpose in helping those who had been left behind, just as Max had helped me. We were all finding our way, step by step. Max grew older, as all dogs do. There came a day when I found myself sitting in the park, holding his head in my lap, feeling the gentle rise and fall of his breathing slow down. His eyes were still bright, but they were tired, full of the wisdom of a life well lived. He had been my guide, my healer, my companion. And as I whispered goodbye to that afternoon, I knew that he had taught me everything I needed to know. The sun dipped below the horizon, and I felt a weight lift from my chest. I didn't feel the emptiness I once had. I felt a sense of peace, a quiet gratitude for the years we had shared. Max had been the heart of this story, and his love would live on, in the students, in the animals we helped, and in the changes we had all made. And so, the story came to an end, but the lessons remained. Sometimes, love isn't something you search for. Sometimes, it's something that finds you when you least expect it, when you've closed your heart off and are convinced that nothing will ever fill the void. But life, in all its unpredictable beauty, has a way of showing us that even in the darkest corners, there is light. And sometimes, all it takes is the love of an animal to remind us that we are never truly alone. The world was different now. Better even, and I knew deep in my heart that Max hadn't just saved me, he had saved all of us. This was the end of one journey, but the beginning of many more. For me, for Buddy, for Charlie, and for anyone who was willing to believe in second chances.